Have you ever thought about grief in a way that sort of looks at the future and maybe what could have been instead of what was in the past? In this video, I kind of want to explore a little bit about that and just talk about how that's probably a little bit more common than what you think. Okay, so grief is something that we all experience. I don't want to necessarily go over the 5 stages of grief. I do have another video on this channel that kind of goes over what that looks like. So maybe go find that if you're not really sure of what the 5 stages of grief are. Okay, so the whole thing with this video, how often do we actually grieve things that could have been? Now, I know that we grieve things that was. So if you lost a loved one, if you're grieving that, or, maybe a pet or whatnot, I'm not discounting that by any means. But I will say, how often do we actually grieve what could have been? Do we get wrapped up in our mindsets and think, I wonder what that friendship would have been like? I wonder what it would have been like if I would have chose this career path. I wonder what it would look like if I would have been with this person, with that person. I know that relationships are a very common one with this too. And you get wrapped up in those thoughts and you think and think and think and think and think, and your brain is just going 90 to nothing. And you're just like, how often is that actually a grief? When something isn't going to happen, you realize it's not going to happen, and there's a grief there. Like, I'm not going to be able to do this. So for example, I can give this example of myself. I wanted to go to the military. I wanted to become a fighter pilot. And yes, I know I'm a little overweight now, but I was much more in shape, 10 years ago. And I think back then I was very adamant about doing this, but then I went and tried to actually start the process and wasn't able to do it because I have flat feet and I do have scoliosis. So both disqualifying conditions, even though my grades and ASVAB scores were very high. So grief of what could have been. What would life have looked like if I were actually able to go through with that? It was a childhood dream. I always wanted to fly. Never got to be able to do that. And so I remember that process of when I came to the realization that I would not be able to do it. It really hit me. And so maybe I look back and I definitely probably was depressed at that time, but it was a grief period of grieving what could have been. Now, I am so thankful that I'm a therapist now and I'm able to help people every day. I'm able to do these really great things. And so I really do believe that I'm able to do awesome stuff now, and I don't necessarily get caught up on that. But from time to time, I kind of wonder what it would be like if I would have been able to do that. Yeah, it really does hit you. So for you, have you ever thought about, a grief of, potential job or even person relationship? Is there a relationship that you ever get caught up in and think about, and grieve what could have been? And so I really think it's important to look at those situations instead of just slapping a label of depression on there, that look at it in the context of grief and actually maybe use some of the coping skills and tools for the grieving process to work through some of this stuff, because I really do believe that it's just as important as grieving the things that once were, and you have to grieve the things that what could have been as well. So the whole thing here is that I just wanted to kind of share this thought process with you. It actually was spurred by a session that I had with a client earlier today. And I'm like, man, I really need to talk about this. So I really encourage you to think about this, but don't get wrapped up in just overthinking, because that is going to probably turn out not so good for you in the long run, of just like thinking of, oh, well, it could have been this, and 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 it could have been this. And then at the end of the day, you've wasted 5 hours thinking on what could have been instead of just being in the present of where you are. So don't ever forget, you have to be present in where we're at. We can't necessarily go change the past. We can't necessarily change the future in some sense, but you can just be grounded in the present and acknowledge what you need to work through. And if there's a grief process of you letting go of something that could have been, that there's no way to get there, then maybe that is something you need to pay attention to. So Anyway, I hope you got something out of that, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. If you've not subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. I do these every week, and I really just like to talk about mental health topics. So if you're interested in more positive mental health, click that subscribe button, and I will see you on the next one.